It's time for part 2 of the Duramax swap. We got a lot of things to cover. Let's get started. In case you haven't followed along, this is the 2005 RCSB Chevy. It has the 4.8 Vortec and a blown up 4L80. You can actually click the link below. There's the previous video on this when me and Hoovie check it out. At first it's a disaster, but the finished product is going to be really sweet. This past week I've gone through slowly as I get time and unhooked everything and getting this ready to pull the LS motor out. Yes, I know it's not a true LS2 or an LS1, but it is based on the LS architecture. It's a Vortec 4.8. We're going to pull this out today with the transmission, the whole thing, and do a few other small things that need to be done to fit the Duramax engine into this engine bay. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get this core support out of the way. I have motor mounts unbolted, transmission mount unbolted, exhaust unbolted, all the things unbolted that need to pull this engine out. As you can see, I've unhooked everything from the engine as far as wiring. It's a huge mess of, I guess, like a spaghetti of wiring. That's going to be fun to go through, but actually it won't be too bad. Most of this won't be used anymore. So let's skip a lot of the talking. Let's actually dive in. I'm going to remove this intake manifold. I've actually unbolted it. I'm going to show you guys a good way to hook up an engine hoist chain and some of the things you shouldn't do with an engine hoist chain. So I'll go ahead and get this intake out of the way. Set it aside. Okay, I've got 2 bolts in on this chain. I'm using the actual cylinder head accessory mounting holes. These are very strong. This is a good way to lift these. I've got either side, left and right, so it's kind of balanced. A lot of people use one of those balancing style engine hoist things. I actually have one. I just don't really like them that much. I like just a good old-fashioned chain. That's the way I do it. I've actually seen in the past where people will hook these chains up to bolts in places they really should not. Let me show you. These little tiny bolt holes here that go to the intake manifold with a tiny little 8mm headed bolt. If you were trying to pick up this engine through there, it would actually break the aluminum or break the bolt. Something really bad would happen. You also don't want to hook them to something really small or part of the accessories. You could break them. It needs to be the block or the heads, and it needs to be pretty good sized bolts like I have here. So I'll go ahead and get the engine hoist over here and we'll see if we can wiggle this thing out. One nice thing about taking off the core support and the fenders and everything is that you can see I can get really close to the engine now, all the way up to this cross member, which makes it so much easier. I'll go ahead and get this chain hooked up and we'll start seeing what we can do. So I'm going to hook this towards the rear since I'm pulling the transmission as well. A little bit towards the rear, put a bolt in there so it can't slide on the chain. We may have to adjust that a few times. Well, let's go ahead and see what we got. So I got a lot of slack right here, so I'm going to adjust that with the bolt I have up front.
Okay, Wizard, so why did you adjust it at the head and not at the hook?
The reason why is because I want the weight transferred to where the center is kind of in the rear of the engine, the center of the chain, not towards the front. And I took the slack out because once I start pulling on this, the engine will be one side higher than the other, so I'm trying to even that out. So the one thing I need to do right now is clear the oil pan from the cross member below. I already have the transmission mount and everything unhooked on the back, so once I clear the oil pan, then I can scoot this whole thing forward. Still have a little ways to go, you can see. So one thing I'm going to do real quick is hop underneath and unbolt the cross member. It'll take like literally a minute. That way the transmission back end can drop down and not be getting kind of caught on the firewall there. I was hoping I wouldn't have to do that, but I need to be able to clear the oil pan, so let me hop under there real quick and get that done. I could have taken the oil pan off to clear that, but it would just make a huge mess everywhere. It literally took me a minute to get that cross member off. Now the angle is a lot better. Let's go ahead and try this again. There we go. So now we're clear of the oil pan. The drive shaft has just slipped off the back of the transmission. One thing to always keep in mind when you're pulling an engine on any vehicle is always know that you're probably left a wire or something hooked up. If it starts to get bound up, don't just pump even harder on the hoist. You might be fighting a harness or a wire, just like we see here. I did loosen this ground, but I didn't take it all the way off. There we go. Making sure those transmission cooler lines don't get bound up or get caught on something. One thing I see before I go any further is I need to unhook this little hose right here. You can see it just has a little union. I'll go ahead and get some wrenches and get that loose. One thing you need to be aware of is when you go to pull an engine or transmission, it's going to make a mess. No muffler Newton, again. So let's go ahead, and I have this little kind of an old moving blanket. I'll throw this on top of the mess it's making so it doesn't spread all over the floor.
Oh, Wizard, it piddled.
Yep, it made a little mess. So let's go ahead and throw this on. There we go. So I'll do one more double check to make sure there's no wires or hoses or anything. I don't see anything there. I don't see anything over here, so we'll raise it up a little bit more and then start pulling back. Making sure everything's clear. All right. Go a little higher. And you can see, since I have the chain set up the way I did, where it's a little further towards the back of the engine, that it helps balance the load, where it's not tilted like this. It's easy to get out that way. Let's go ahead and pull it the rest of the way out. These lines that are coming out of the transmission, I was just kind of guiding them when I was coming out. I wasn't pulling on them or anything like that, but it's leaking a little bit, so I'll go ahead and put a little piddle pad down. And we can probably tie these up somehow. I'll get a couple of zip ties and tie them up. So one thing to make sure to check out when you put this on a pallet or whatever you're going to do with it is make sure it's balanced. I've got some blocks underneath the front of the oil pan. This is a very front heavy engine, or the setup anyway. If you just had it sitting on the ground, someone could actually lean on it or push it. It could fall on their foot. So you want it to be stable. Maybe even put a ratchet strap across it and then put it to the side and store it till you do whatever you're going to do with it. So there we have a nice empty hole to put a Duramax in. And coming up soon, what we're going to do is start test fitting that. But you can see where the LS motor bolted in. I'll grab one of the Duramax mounts. So here we have one of the actual Duramax motor mounts. And we can see that it fits right where an LS motor would go. Look at that, guys. All the bolts line up nice. We'll try the other side. Boom. So I have conquered the LS removal of the gangster truck, as Hoovie called it. There's one more thing I'm going to remove before this video is done, and I'm going to yeet out the vacuum booster. I'm not going to throw it because I can probably sell it or somebody can reuse it. Set it right there for now. We'll be putting Hydro Boost right here, which uses power steering for power brakes. And it gives plenty of room for the engine to fit here. So that's it for this video. We got many, many more steps to go. But at least now we have a truck with no more cat eye and no more LS engine in it. Make sure to check out Mrs. Wizard's Way in the description below. She's got all kinds of cool videos going there. If you're curious what kind of tools we use to work on this truck or any other vehicle in the shop, check our Amazon affiliates link in the description below. We get a small cut and really appreciate it. And make sure to hit the subscribe button on this channel because you're going to want to keep up with this guy, the bus, Malibu, all kinds of things going on. Thanks for watching.